The tennis world has been talking about Alexandra Eala for months. First, it was her fearless performances against some of the biggest names in women's tennis. Then it was her remarkable run on grass courts that completely changed how many people viewed her future. But now, as the spotlight shifts to the Mubadala DC Open, a new storyline is beginning to take shape, one that has everything to do with confidence, momentum, and a message that doesn't need to be spoken out loud. Because sometimes the loudest statement in sports isn't delivered during a press conference. Sometimes it's delivered with a racket, just weeks after producing one of the biggest victories of her career against Elena Rybakina in Berlin. Alex Eala is preparing for the North American hard court season, carrying something she didn't have before. Belief. Not hope. Not potential. Belief. And that's exactly why so many tennis fans are paying close attention to what happens next. The victory over Rybakina wasn't simply another upset. It represented something much deeper. Earlier in the season, Eala had faced the Kazakh star on clay in Rome and came away with a valuable lesson after a straight sets defeat. Instead of allowing that loss to define her, she treated it as an opportunity to learn. When the two met again on grass in Berlin, she made visible tactical adjustments, recovered after trailing early in the opening set, and earned one of the most significant wins of her young career. That performance immediately changed the conversation around her. Suddenly, Alex Eala wasn't simply a talented young player capable of upsetting top seeds on a good day. She was becoming someone the elite players genuinely had to prepare for, and that's a completely different level of respect. However, what happened after Berlin may have been even more important. Instead of celebrating for weeks or allowing one victory to become the highlight of her season, Eala continued building momentum. She carried that confidence into Wimbledon, where she reached the fourth round before eventually falling to Jasmine Paolini. Even in defeat, her reaction reflected a player already looking toward the next challenge rather than dwelling on disappointment. That mentality tells you almost everything about where Alex Eala's career is heading. Great players don't spend much time looking backward. They're already focused on the next opportunity. And for Eala, that opportunity is Washington. The Mubadala DC Open isn't just another tournament on the calendar. It marks the beginning of one of the most important stretches of the entire tennis season. Every match on the North American hard courts becomes part of the preparation for the U.S. Open, where the sport's biggest stars hope to peak at exactly the right moment. For rising players, this swing often determines whether a breakthrough season becomes something even bigger. Few people understand that better than Alex Eala. Her results earlier this year showed she can compete on hard courts, but her performances during the grass season elevated expectations even further. Now comes the biggest question of all. Can she carry that same fearless tennis onto the surface, where many of the season's biggest prizes are won? That's the challenge waiting in Washington. And that's why the tennis world is watching. Interestingly, Elena Rybakina isn't even expected to be part of the DC Open field. Yet her presence still hangs over this tournament because Eala's victory against a former world number 2 changed how many players, and perhaps even Eala herself, view what's possible. No headlines, no dramatic speeches, no social media feud, just one unmistakable message delivered through world-class tennis. I'm no longer here just to compete. I'm here to challenge anyone. Whether that belief translates into another deep run remains to be seen. Tennis has a way of humbling even the hottest players. Every tournament presents a fresh challenge. Every opponent requires a different solution, and momentum can disappear just as quickly as it arrives. But one thing is no longer in doubt. Alex Eala has entered a different chapter of her career. The rest of the WTA Tour knows it. The fans know it. And as the Mubadala DC Open gets underway, everyone will be watching to see whether this remarkable rise is only the beginning. The story of Alex Eala's arrival in Washington didn't begin when she stepped onto the practice courts at Rock Creek Park. It began much earlier with a defeat. That's often how real growth happens in professional tennis. Fans remember the victories. Players remember the lessons. Back in Rome, Elena Rybakina exposed several areas where Eala still needed to improve. The Kazakh star controlled the rallies with her powerful serve and aggressive forehand, making it difficult for the young Filipina to dictate play. Instead of forcing spectacular winners, Rybakina patiently created opportunities until the pressure became overwhelming. It was a type of performance that reminds every rising player just how demanding the very top of the WTA Tour can be. For many young players, a loss like that lingers. Confidence disappears. Doubt grows. But Eala's team viewed it differently. They treated Rome as information. Every return position, every rally pattern, every second serve exchange. Everything became valuable data rather than a reason to panic. That approach would prove invaluable only a few weeks later. When the Berlin Open draw was announced, Eala found herself facing Rybakina once again. On paper, almost everything favored the former Grand Slam champion. She was one of the most consistent players on tour. She possessed one of the biggest serves in women's tennis, and she had already beaten Eala earlier in the season. Most observers expected a similar outcome. Then the match began. For the opening stretch, those predictions looked completely accurate. Rybakina surged ahead early, using her trademark first serve to earn quick points while forcing Eala deep behind the baseline. The momentum appeared firmly in her favor, and many watching assumed another routine victory was unfolding. But something subtle was changing. It wasn't obvious at first. It wasn't a spectacular highlight. It was positioning. Instead of standing several feet behind the baseline on returns, Eala gradually began stepping forward. She started attacking second serves more aggressively, shortening Rybakina's reaction time and preventing Kazakh from immediately taking control of rallies. At the same time, she redirected the ball toward Rybakina's backhand with sharper angles, forcing the taller player to move laterally rather than simply dictate from the center of the court. Those tactical adjustments completely altered the rhythm of the match. That's one of the fascinating realities of elite tennis. Sometimes victory doesn't come from hitting harder. It comes from making smarter decisions. Every step forward on a return, every extra ball forced into an uncomfortable corner, every subtle adjustment eventually changes the entire match. By the end of the opening set, the momentum had completely shifted. The confidence that had belonged to Rybakina was now visible on Eala's side of the net. And once that confidence appeared, she never really gave it back. Winning the second set completed one of the biggest victories of her career and instantly became one of the defining moments of her 2026 season. Just as memorable was the emotion that followed when Eala celebrated by calling her family after the match, a reminder that even career-changing victories remain deeply personal for young athletes chasing their dreams. However, one match alone doesn't transform a season. Consistency does. That's exactly what Eala began demonstrating over the following weeks. Instead of allowing the Berlin victory to become an isolated headline, she continued building on it. Her confidence carried into Wimbledon, where she produced another impressive run and earned valuable experience competing on one of tennis's biggest stages. While her tournament eventually ended against Jasmine Paolini, the overall message remained clear. The performances in Berlin were not a one-match anomaly. That brings us directly to Washington. The Mubadala DC Open represents more than another opportunity to collect ranking points. It serves as the opening chapter of the North American hardcourt season, a stretch where every result can influence confidence heading into U.S. Open. Players spend months preparing for these events. The margins become even smaller. Every match carries greater significance. And unlike grass, where movement and reactions differ dramatically, hard courts reward players who combine aggressive shot-making with tactical discipline. Fortunately for Eala, hard courts have already produced several encouraging performances earlier in the year. Deep runs in Auckland, Dubai, Indian Wells, and Miami suggested this surface fits her game well, giving her reason to believe that the momentum from grass can continue as she adapts quickly after the surface change. Still, one major question remains. Can she handle the growing expectations? Because that's the hidden challenge facing every rising star. Early in your career, every upset feels like a bonus. Eventually, people stop calling them upsets. They start expecting them. And that changes everything. The pressure increases. Opponents prepare differently. Every victory becomes harder to earn. For Eala, Washington is the first tournament where she arrives not as an overlooked outsider, but as one of the players everyone will be watching. And that may be the biggest test of all. Every breakthrough season reaches a point where the conversation changes. It stops being about talent. It stops being about potential. Instead, it becomes a question of sustainability. Can this level be maintained? Can these performances become the new standard rather than the exception? That is exactly where Eala finds herself entering the Mubadala DC Open. Only a few months ago, many analysts viewed her primarily as one of the brightest young prospects in women's tennis. She possessed excellent timing from both wings, impressive court awareness, and the competitive spirit needed to challenge experienced opponents. But prospects don't stay prospects forever. Eventually, they either establish themselves or they fade from the spotlight. Eala appears determined to choose the first path. One reason is that her improvement hasn't relied on a single weapon. She isn't winning because she suddenly developed the fastest serve on tour. She isn't overpowering opponents with unmatched physical strength. Instead, her progress has come through a combination of tactical discipline, improved shot selection, smarter point construction, and growing confidence under pressure. Those qualities tend to be more sustainable over a long season. Few people notice another important trend developing throughout 2026. Eala has steadily become more comfortable making in-match adjustments. That's a characteristic shared by many of the sport's elite competitors. When Plan A isn't working, they don't panic. They adapt. The Berlin victory over Elena Rybakina illustrated that perfectly. Rather than trying to out-hit one of the tour's biggest ball strikers, Eala altered her return position, attacked second serves more aggressively, and redirected rallies toward areas that disrupted Rybakina's rhythm. Those weren't emotional decisions. They were calculated tactical adjustments made during the match itself. That ability may prove even more valuable than raw power, because on the WDA Tour, every opponent presents a different puzzle. One week you face a dominant server. The next week, a relentless counterpuncher. Then comes a player who thrives on long baseline exchanges. No single strategy works against everyone. Adaptability separates contenders from champions. Another encouraging sign is how Eala has responded to setbacks. Her clay court season wasn't perfect. There were difficult losses and several early exits, but those results also highlighted areas requiring further development rather than derailing her progress. Instead of allowing disappointment to carry into the next swing, she embraced the transition to grass and produced some of the finest tennis of her career. That resilience shouldn't be underestimated. Professional tennis demands constant emotional balance. Players travel almost every week. They compete across multiple continents. They switch surfaces several times each season. And every tournament begins with the possibility of an early exit. Handling that lifestyle requires extraordinary mental discipline. Washington now presents an entirely different examination. The grass courts are gone. The movement changes. The bounce changes. Even the rhythm of points changes. Hard courts reward clean ball striking, quick reactions, and efficient movement between offense and defense. Fortunately, Eala has already shown she can succeed on this surface. Earlier in the season, she produced encouraging results in Auckland, Dubai, Indian Wells, and Miami, suggesting that hard courts naturally complement many aspects of her game. However, there is another layer to the story. Pressure. Success creates expectations. Every victory over a top player makes future opponents take you more seriously. Scouting reports become more detailed. Coaches spend additional hours analyzing tendencies. Weaknesses become easier to identify. That means Eala is unlikely to surprise opponents the way she once did. Instead, she must consistently outperform players who already know exactly what she's capable of. That's one of the biggest transitions in any athlete's career. Interestingly, this evolving dynamic also affects Elena Rybakina. Although she isn't expected to compete in Washington, their rivalry feels far from finished. The season series currently stands even after Rome and Berlin, creating the possibility of another fascinating meeting later in the hard court season. If that happens, both players will enter with completely different memories. Rybakina remembering how a commanding lead slipped away in Berlin, and Eala remembering that she successfully solved one of the most difficult challenges on tour. Psychology matters in tennis, perhaps more than in almost any other individual sport. Every previous encounter becomes part of the next one. Every comeback builds belief. Every collapse creates doubt. That's why victories often extend far beyond the final handshake at the net. They shape future matches before the first ball is even struck. So what would a deep run in Washington actually mean? It wouldn't guarantee success at the U.S. Open. It wouldn't automatically place Eala among the favorites for every major tournament, but it would strengthen the growing evidence that her rise is based on consistent improvement rather than temporary momentum. And sometimes that's the most important step of all. If there's one lesson that Eala's 2026 season has taught the tennis world, it's that development rarely happens in a straight line. There have been impressive victories. There have been painful defeats. There have been moments that sparked headlines around the world. And there have been quieter weeks where the most important progress happened far away from television cameras. That's the reality of becoming an elite athlete. Every practice session matters. Every difficult loss matters. Every adjustment eventually becomes part of a much bigger picture. As the Mubadala DC Open begins, Eala isn't simply chasing another tournament result. She's entering the next phase of her career. For the first time, she arrives at a major hardcore event carrying genuine expectations. Not because of hype, but because of what she has already accomplished this season. Her performances across multiple tournaments, highlighted by the victory over Elena Rybakina in Berlin and a strong Wimbledon campaign, have established a foundation that opponents can no longer ignore. That's a completely different challenge. When you're an underdog, every win feels like a surprise. When you're becoming one of the tour's emerging stars, every match carries added pressure. Suddenly, you're the player everyone studies, the player everyone prepares for, the player everyone wants to beat. How an athlete responds to that new reality often determines whether a breakthrough season becomes the beginning of something even greater. Fortunately for Eala, her greatest strength may not be her forehand, or her backhand, or even her movement. It may be her mindset. Throughout the season, she has repeatedly spoken about approaching difficult moments with courage, composure, and intensity rather than fear. That perspective has become a consistent theme as she continues climbing the rankings and facing increasingly difficult competition. That attitude could become her biggest advantage during the North American swing, because the tournaments ahead only become more demanding. After Washington comes the opportunity to compete against many of the world's best players once again during the lead-up to the U.S. Open. Every match offers another chance to improve, another chance to test new strategies, another chance to prove that recent success wasn't simply the product of one outstanding month. And perhaps that's the quiet message her victory over Elena Rybakina truly delivered. It wasn't directed only at one opponent. It was directed at the entire WTA Tour. It suggested that Alexandra Eala has reached a point where she believes she belongs on the same court as anyone, not because rankings say so, not because fans expect it, but because she has earned that belief through experience. Confidence built on preparation is one of the most dangerous qualities in professional sports. We've seen it countless times throughout tennis history. A young player records one signature victory. That victory changes self-belief. The improved confidence leads to better performances. Those performances create even more confidence. Before long, a future champion has emerged. Is Alex Eala already at that stage? It's far too early to make that claim. Professional tennis has a way of challenging every player, no matter how talented they are. There will be setbacks. There will be difficult draws. There will be tournaments where nothing seems to go according to plan. That's simply part of competing at the highest level. But what makes this season so fascinating is that Eala has consistently shown an ability to learn, adjust, and return stronger after adversity. From the lessons of the clay season to the confidence gained on grass and the transition back to hard courts, her progression has followed a clear pattern of continuous development rather than isolated success. Now the focus turns to Washington. Can she carry that momentum onto hard courts? Can she produce another deep run against a talented field? Can she continue proving that Berlin and Wimbledon were not isolated moments, but signs of players steadily establishing herself among the sport's rising contenders? Those answers will arrive one match at a time. And that's exactly what makes this next chapter so compelling. Because the biggest stars in tennis aren't remembered for one unforgettable victory. They're remembered for turning one breakthrough into a career. Alex Eala now has that opportunity. The journey continues in Washington. The countdown to the U.S. Open has officially begun. And if the progress we've witnessed throughout this remarkable season is any indication, the tennis world should keep watching. because the most exciting chapter of Eala's story may still be waiting to be written. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this in-depth analysis, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates from the world of tennis. We'll continue following Eala's journey throughout the North American hardcourt swing and bring you every major development as it happens. Until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.